Good evening and welcome everyone to the almost midsummer meeting of Mahone Bay Town Council. We do have all of our councilors with us tonight and some of our staff. And we have some folks at home who are watching the proceedings on YouTube. And when the meeting is concluded, or at the end of the meeting, there'll be an opportunity for the people who may be watching to address a question to council on any topic that is discussed tonight. Before we go to the actual council agenda, we will begin by acknowledging that we are gathered today again in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral, present, and future territory of the Mi'kmaq people. Today, we gather with the intent provided by the Living Peace and Friendship Treaties with respect, cooperation, and coexistence. And we're thankful for that. Council, you have an agenda that was emailed to you. What is your wish? Councillor Carver.
I'll move that the agenda be approved as circulated.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Burdick. Moved and seconded to accept the agenda as circulated. All in favor? The motion is carried. Let's go to the first item on the agenda, the minutes. And first we have the minutes of the variance appeal hearing of the 24th of June.
Mayor, I'd
Councillor
move, Mayor, I'd move that council accept the minutes as presented for the variance meeting of the 22nd of June.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson. Seconded? Thank you.
Yes,
Moved and
second, but noting that it's the 24th, not the
24th of June, that's right, as given on the paper. Councillor Feeney, of course, you're comfortable with that. Okay, you've heard the motion. It's been seconded. All in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you. Let's go to the minutes of the regular meeting, also on June 24th, 2021. Councillor Wilson.
I'd like to move that those minutes be accepted as presented, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson, or Councillor Now, seconds it. Thank you. Moved and seconded that the minutes of the meeting of June 24th be accepted as presented. All in favor? Motion is carried. Now, there are no presentations tonight. Let's go to correspondence. We have 5 items listed as for action. Clerk, will you speak to the items or?
Oh, sorry, I didn't get to my mute fast enough, but I know you're having audio issues in the first place, and I normally speak to these if necessary. The first one, Mr. Mayor, if you're referring to the signage request,
Yep.
So it's outside of our jurisdiction there because it refers to Highway 3 between Mahone Bay and Lunenburg. But I would take the request to be a request to ask the province to do what's being requested rather than for us to do it. So council's prerogative if you feel that that would be something that you would wish to make a motion on.
Okay, Councillor Wilson.
I was just wondering, Your Worship, when I read this letter, why this is not just in the for information section rather than the action section, because it's clear we can't do anything about it.
Well, I guess it's just because they do make a direct request, even though it is not within our power to grant that request, and we didn't really feel that we could put it in for information where it is making a direct request. And no action is necessary. You can always receive and file correspondence for action as well. So you don't actually have to do anything with it.
So the motion could be to receive and file this particular item?
Yeah, if council doesn't feel that it's our jurisdiction or doesn't feel action is warranted.
Okay, Deputy Mayor?
Just wondering if we can just basically, like the CEO said, write to the province to sort of say this is a concern that's been raised, and whether the province can look into it and see whether that's a good remedial action for that section of the highway.
Okay, Councillor Wilson and then Councillor Carver.
Oh, sorry, I'm good.
Okay, Councillor Carver.
If the deputy mayor was making a motion, I'll second it.
Okay, Deputy Mayor, you're making a motion to have staff write to the province,
Yes, please.
okay? And that's what you're
forwarding-
seconding?
Forwarding this to their concern, if I'm correct in
Okay,
understanding.
yep. You've heard the motion? On the question. All in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you. The next item concerns parking on Main Street. Not
So,
an issue we've heard before, but
If I can just speak to this quickly for context, especially for the viewing public and some of the new counselors, back when we did our transportation plan report last year with CBCL, they did have a large section around parking enforcement and did recommend that, if council is concerned about the number of spaces in the downtown, which we haven't necessarily identified as a priority of this council, but if we were, enforcement rather than creation of additional lots is one of the options that they recommended that council weigh. And essentially the price tag associated with that enforcement was recommended to be, at least during the summer months, a full-time person doing enforcement, which would be typical in these cases. So that's essentially the question here from a staff perspective is, we don't have the capacity with our current bylaw enforcement, if we put up the signs, to enforce them on a regular basis. So I just wanted to note for council that there was that study, and it did recommend that this would be an option to make more parking available, but it would be an ongoing cost associated with enforcement.
Councillor Carver and then Councillor Feeney.
Thank you. I would be tempted to make a motion to lump a couple of these parking and traffic issues together and ask for a report from the Traffic Authority CAO. That would include a cost, for example, of a parking bylaw enforcement, and also to look at the Pleasant Street, Main Street parking situation. Would that be an appropriate motion to make for the CAO and Traffic Authority to investigate both those issues?
Yeah, I think it would be.
And just to make it a really meaty soup, to throw in item 4.5, which raises some questions about parking in the open shoreline zone, but of particular interest there or concern was were the comments about overnight parking. So I could either do it as just the 2 items or all 3 items, whatever seems workable.
The CAO has a comment.
I want to suggest you do it as the first 2 separately from the other, just where they speak to parking on town property and the final one speaks to parking on private property.
Oh, except for the part about the overnight vehicles parking in the church parking lots.
Well, we are leasing them, but I guess I would still generally see that as more
Okay.
akin to the,
Then I would make a motion that those items 4.2 and 4.3 be referred to the Traffic Authority / CAO, requesting a report back about efficient ways to approach these concerns.
Thank you, Councillor Carver. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Burdick seconds. You've heard the motion. Item number 2, number 3, and number 5. No, not 5. That's seen as a different item. 2 and 3 will be referred to staff for review and a report. Councillor Nell?
Yeah, Councilor Carver had mentioned in her prelim there that we'd include the costs for the bylaw enforcement officer. I didn't hear it in the motion. Was it included there and I missed it, or are we going to include that?
I think when I made the motion, I sort of figured that was part of the intent of the
Mhm.
most efficient way of it. But certainly I could add including the costs of temporary traffic bylaw and parking bylaw enforcement.
Okay, so that would be included in your motion, Councillor Carver.
Yes.
Councillor Burdick, do you support that change?
We might
Thank
want to
you.
give our clerk just a, Maureen, are you comfortable? Yeah, I'm not going to ask you to read it if you're totally good with it, but if you wanted to read it or if you had any questions.
I wouldn't mind another read through all together. Those pieces came together there.
Penny, do you want to take another crack at it?
So I move that correspondence items 4.2 and 4.3 concerning traffic issues in the town of Mahone Bay be referred to the CAO/traffic authority requesting a report to council on ways to address these problems, including cost of temporary parking enforcement staff. How does that sound?
All right. You've heard the motion on the question. All in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you. Let's go to item 4.4. Made for Mahone Bay's request for a development agreement. Councillor Feeney.
Mayor, I'd move that item 4.4 be forwarded to the PAC to move that request along through the process.
Councillor Now.
I'll second that, and I guess it also has to go to the planning staff.
Yeah, Maureen, I know you're having audio issues, I think, but this would normally get a report from the planning staff to accompany it to
Before
PAC,
PAC.
to Richard's point. Okay, so it will go to, if we refer to PAC, that will include Garth's report. We're good with that? Okay.
So we'll leave it to the PAC to refer this document to the planners for their perspective.
I guess the planners will automatically provide their report to
Yeah.
PAC because it would make sense for PAC to consider it otherwise. But then on PAC's receipt of it, the question would be to initiate the public process from there,
Okay.
the hearing process.
Councillor Burdick, you have a comment?
Thank you. I just had a question, not to throw a spanner in the works, but I'm not entirely sure about the process in terms of where we are with the LUB and where some of the considerations for rezoning are there. If when something is received at this point, if it's just considered according to the rules now, or yeah.
If I
Thank
can
you.
speak to that.
CAO?
Yeah, so it's essentially, we have told most people that, we are planning to make some major changes as a result of the plan review, and that if what they're looking for would be reflected in that, to essentially stay tuned. In this case, essentially this piece of property that has an institutional zone associated with it, that institutional zone is a kind of a holdover from prior use. So the typical thing that would happen when you're doing a plan review and consolidation is if that use is no longer in place, it would end up being eliminated. The intention for that area is a residential zone. It would be picked up in a rezoning to residential. The hurry here to not wait on that process and request that what is essentially a foregone conclusion, the rezoning of the property as residential, if that is the intention of our planning strategy for that street, is to have that change made sooner, because if the property is not zone residential, they're not allowed to apply for the development agreement that would be permitted in that zone. So normally we wouldn't do a rezoning request now. We would just do the development agreement request by itself. But the rezoning has to be done prior to, and the rezoning is a relatively simple procedure, so the planning staff are recommending it could be done concurrently with the development agreement process. And again, mostly because if anyone knows the property, the institutional zoning there is an aberration on that street. The rest of the street zoning is residential.
Okay, thank you, CAL. So we're going to refer this to PAC. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. That was 4.4. And 4.5 is another traffic piece. I'm running two screens again, so 4.5. Councillor Wilson.
Once again, Your Worship, this one puzzled me in the sense of why wouldn't it just be for information? There's, as far as I can see, nothing for council in this these questions from Mr. Puxley. There may or may not be something for staff to do if the owner of that property is in violation of a bylaw or whatever, but, which I don't think he is. But I don't see that there's anything that council can do to solve Mr. Puxley's question.
Thank you. Councillor Carver.
Yes, I see the area where the town could be involved is to investigate the comments about overnight parking.
Well, if I may, Your Worship, it's a private property. It's not even a parking lot. It's only a parking lot by the good graces of the person who owns it. And if he chooses to have people park there overnight, I don't think anybody's business but his.
CAO, you had a comment?
Yeah, so I guess this is always a question whether these could be put under information or action. The request was that this be put on council's agenda, but I do agree that these, with respect to the enforcement of parking within the town leased lot at the Anglican Church, I think Councillor Wilson's point is that's it's something for staff to deal with at an administrative level, and we certainly will take that as a concern. If we're aware of overnight parking there, we can take enforcement action now that we're leasing it, as the town was not leasing it until this year. Over the years that, the church may or may not have enforced their rules around that, but so I agree that is a administrative thing, but there was a request that this be put on the council agenda. So
thank you. Deputy Mayor.
But for clarity, it's staff will be investigating just the church parking lot. It's not the property close to Kelly's place, right?
no, we wouldn't have any discretion over, jurisdiction over that one.
Because I think that distinction should be clear, so that we're not getting into situations where we are saying we're investigating parking in people's private property. Right?
Thank you. Councillor Feeney and then Councillor Wilson.
So I guess just speaking plainly, I think I'm on the same page as Councillor Wilson and the deputy mayor. Specifically on the letter, and kind of while I'm empathetic to the idea that the view plane would be restricted, that conversation and the context for the open shoreline zone was well addressed by council. I think the policy that was enforced was well done, and I'm certainly very appreciative of the business owner who owns the land and the decisions that they've made recently. So I think we ended up in a really good place. It took us a while to get there, but I'd have complimentary things to say about the homeowner and the landowner on where we ended up. Now, one of the benefits of those decisions was kind of we kind of codified in the public's understanding of what can be done, and for periodic use of parking of a large vehicle for a short window of time periodically. I think that the Councilor Wilson made the point well, and I don't think there's much for us to do in this situation right now. So, I think there's our ability to impact that use, I think, is limited. And then, I think we just, in another week, I'm sure the vehicle will move and the problem will go away, or it'll, and then it will be back, and then it will move. And that's the whole idea behind having vehicles with wheels. They come, they park, then they go away. And I think we talked about that quite a lot last summer. And so I'm, all in all, I'm pretty happy with where we are this summer relative to where we were in the past.
Thank you, Councillor Burdick.
Thank you. I do wonder if the letter writer, it did seem like he wasn't sure if it was public or private property. So maybe that can be clarified for him, because that did seem to be part of the, not the entire crux of his concern, but part of it, certainly. And that being the reason that we can't really address that issue for him.
Thank
Is
you. Any other comments?
Your worship, I just
Councillor
wanted,
Carver. And then Councillor Wilson.
It's all right. So what I appreciated in that discussion was some clarification from Mr. Hyde about letters that will be dealt with administratively as opposed to coming to council. So this particular question might have been just dealt with directly by the administration, even without coming to council.
Okay. Councillor Wilson.
yes, your worship, I just wanted council to know that I just sent a couple of photos of the offending trailer taken by me. So hopefully less editorial in composition than the ones that we have seen otherwise. Anyway, that's it.
Thank you. CAO.
Just to Councillor Carver's question, so this was a letter that was requested by the writer to be put on council's agenda. So the only point there was whether it could have been put down for information, because ultimately staff would action the administrative side of it. But as far as it being presented to the council, that was Mr. Foxley's request.
Okay. Not to paraphrase Councillor Feeney, but to clarify that the particular trailer that is showing in this photograph, or ones like it, can be parked on this property? Is that what we're saying?
The trailer can be parked on the piece of private property at Kitty's. Yeah, that's not something that we have. We would only come into it if a vehicle is derelict. That's really the only.
Yeah.
Or if it was being used for temporary vending
Yeah,
purposes?
if it was, yeah, but just to be parked on private property anywhere in town is not, we don't really regulate that.
Okay. So this is just going to be handled administratively, CAO?
And again, just for anybody watching, I think the point was made to clarify the part that will be handled administratively is the part about enforcing overnight parking in the Anglican Church parking lot.
Yes.
Now that the town does lease that parking lot. So if we do get any reports, we'll get somebody down there. It's as you know, we have a part-time bylaw enforcement, so chances are those reports will be after hours, but we'll do what we can certainly to stay on top of that.
Okay. Councillor Now.
Yeah, just to clarify, CAO, so you are going to write a letter to Mr. Puxley saying that we don't have control over that other parking lot where the trailers are parked?
I wouldn't normally. You know, we don't normally follow up with explanations to everyone. I mean, he can read the minutes, he can watch this meeting record. If council so directs, and we've been over this a few times, if council so directs, we can write back with an explanation, but it's just a lot of time for every piece of correspondence that comes in. I think he knows that we received it and we didn't do anything, and he can look into why.
Okay. Okay, council? Good. Okay, let's go to the next item on the agenda. Information correspondence. There are 5 pieces there. What is your wish? Councillor Wilson.
Motion to receive and file, your worship.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Counselor Now seconds. Motion to receive and file the correspondence under information. On the question, Counselor Burdick, you have a comment?
Yes, thank you. I did notice in 5.4, the memo about the Canadian Standards Association's public consultation on indications for rural community prosperity might be something that we want to, I know we all received it, but it might be a good idea for us to respond to that if we can, if we're able to, just because that does directly affect our communities. I think it was in the most recent
Monday memo?
Monday memo. Yeah.
Yeah. Consultation period is open till July 24th.
Yeah. I just wanted to point that out because there's a lot of information in those things that we necessarily see.
There's no link or anything in there, is there?
No, I'm not seeing anything.
I think my eyes went right past that because it didn't direct you anywhere to actually.
Yeah,
Consultation.
It doesn't really tell you how to register or what they're looking for or how to go
that
about.
that might have been why I was curious about it, because it did seem like something that would be really applicable to us, and that we would need a link to access that might have something to do with our community prosperity if we can't reach it. Anyway.
I'll contact NSFM tomorrow and I'll get clarification as to what, if anything, we can do at this level to encourage participation and how citizens might be able to do that. Deputy Mayor?
There's a link in the actual memo in the emails. You can click on it and it'll take you to the consultation or the draft paper that they're talking about.
I didn't see that. I also put a link, and maybe the same link, in the chat just now for anybody who seems to take you to the consultative portal on CSA's website.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so nothing then? We've got our individual links and counselors can follow up on it. Okay. So let's get rid of that.
We have a motion to receive and file, your worship.
We do have a motion outstanding. The questions were on the motion. All in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you. Let's go to item 6, staff reports to council. This is the first set of reports of the month. CAO, do we have any questions for our CAO or staff?
I guess it's appropriate to note here, even though it will be updated on the next meeting's report. But I had noted to council members the next report from Director of Operations will be report from Manager of Public Works and Transportation, and that has not been updated now with the retirement of the Director of Operations. So that's 2 months behind now, but the next one should include the first report of our new manager.
Okay. Councillor Burdick.
Thank you. There was a point that came up, which was, I think, item 8, which was, it has come up before, I know, about ProKids, and it did come up also in the letter from Michael Graves from United Way, and I was just wondering if there had been any further communication with or from Modal as our budgets. Has their budget gone through as ours has, or?
Yeah, I think their budget has been approved, and I think that the last communications that we had around this, the amount of money in our budget was, a fair bit short of where their estimates on prior years from Mahone Bay had been. But to my recollection, we don't actually have an agreement that if we were to specify a certain amount of money that they would administer it. Maureen, I don't know if you care to comment. Maybe we could just bring an update sometime soon. But I don't believe we have a actual proposal from MODL. We just have an estimated amount of money. If we had a proposal, it would exceed by a little bit our approved budget for this item. But until we do, I don't know that we would revisit it.
Thank you. Councillor Carver.
It's just frustrating because this item has been around for almost 2 years. And is there a way for the town of Mahone Bay to be operationalizing this Pro Kids program on our own without modal?
CAO.
I mean, anything is possible with staff time. We don't have a recreation department. So to me, the decision not to participate in this program was a part and parcel to the decision not to have recreation staff. There's nothing saying that potentially other organizations in the community with a recreational focus couldn't find a way to offer this program. Our challenge with MODL has been around the way that organizations like Pro Kids support the activities. Right now, that support benefits Mahone Bay residents, and we haven't been able to find an agreement with MODL that would actually allow that to continue, which essentially means that our residents are better served without an agreement with MODL at the current time, which I think is unfortunate. But any agreement we have needs to allow for the privately raised donations and United Way donations to benefit Mahone Bay residents in an equal fashion as they would MODL residents. And so that's been maybe challenging to figure out a formal way to do, although informally they've been extremely supportive of residents in Mahone Bay.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson, did you have a comment?
No, I'll withdraw my time. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else for the CAO? Councillor Feeney?
Mayor, just to Councilor Burdick's point about the Pro Kids. So, I thought we have a budgeted item, as I understand it. I believe it's modest, but it's there and it's been in our budget for 2 calendar years and unused. And I wonder if the CAO or any of council has. I did see some Facebook posts this week about children and T-ball and other programs, and obviously the deputy mayor is well aware of the programs being run for the soccer, for the youth with soccer. And I'm just wondering if, given where we are in the calendar year, it's already mid-July, maybe we should reprofile that modest amount of budget to one of these endeavors. Otherwise I assume it's not going to be spent. So the original theme here was to provide some funding to make sure that youth could take advantage of, recreational activities. I don't know, it seems to me if we don't decide to do something this evening, then another summer will go by, and it'll either go back into surplus. Fine, well, maybe we'll find another use for it next year, but maybe there's a great idea in the next couple of weeks we can find where that money can be reprofiled.
Okay. Deputy CAO.
Just to make a point of clarification is that a lot of the funding that goes for Pro Kids activities and traditionally program youth in Mahone Bay that have accessed Pro Kids activity money in the last couple of years does actually happen outside of the summer months. I'm seeing music, arts, football, 2020, 2021. So, I mean, football is technically traditionally a fall program, that sort of thing. So just to clarify that these, a lot of the Pro Kids money goes to programs outside of the summer months.
Okay. Thank you. CAO?
A further clarification, and I'll check on this with Luke, but my understanding is we did contribute the amount last year to MODL. And so I assume we would be doing that again, unless they returned our check last year.
Okay, well, those are good.
Not likely.
So if it
Good
finds
points
its
of
way into the Pro
clarification.
Kids program, then presumably it is helping the kids.
Okay.
It just, it's an informal way rather than having a formal agreement.
Hmm. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. CAO, would you like a mid-month motion on this one?
Yeah, you can always accept this report. That's great.
Entertain a motion that we accept the report as presented. Thank you, Councillor Feeney. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Wilson? You've heard the motion on the question. All in favor? Thank you. Motion is carried. The staff report has been accepted. Let's go to the appointment of our new building inspector. Okay, Councillor Carver.
So based on the report that we've had from staff, I would like to make a motion that the June 24th, 2021 motion that appointed Reed Wynot as a building inspector for the town of Mahone Bay be repealed.
Okay, do we have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Burdick. You've heard the motion to repeal the appointment of June 24th. All in favor? Thank you. Motion's carried.
Shall I continue?
Yes, please.
And I further move that Ryan Wynot be appointed as building inspector for the town of Mahone Bay, effective July 13, 2021, and until such time as that appointment is revoked.
Thank you, Councillor Carver. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Burdick seconds. You've heard the motion to appoint Ryan Wynot as our building inspector effective July 13th. On the question, all in favor? Thank you. The motion is carried. And Mr. Wynot is now our building inspector. Let's go to the staff report on water loss control. Comments?
So I just quickly will introduce this one. This is a follow-up on the report that we had done previously, looking at the potential sources of loss within the water system. Our water operator has received a proposal. This was the company that initially was going to work with us to do some analysis of our transmission line last year, and then our provincial funding shifted to the waste effluent deadline, and this priority from transmission to distribution reflects council's recent strategic planning process and the focus on losses within the distribution system. So we have a budget this year. Now that staff have received this proposal, and this proposal falls within our intended town portion of that budget, staff recommend that we accept this proposal, conduct the audit that's being proposed, and present those recommendations to council in next year's budget, which would provide us an opportunity to go back to that provincial funding program that we had accessed for the wastewater effluent, the provincial capital assistance program. We could have applied for provincial capital assistance program funding for this audit. However, the recommendations from it are sure to be more significant than the audit itself. And where the audit is within the projected town contribution, we recommend we proceed on our own. So that's the recommendation here. And take any questions.
Okay. Councillor Feeney and then the deputy mayor.
So Mayor, this strikes me as a good idea. I mean, I think Councillor Wilson has brought this forward a few times about the high percentage loss of water. I know it's a concern for all of council, and it strikes me that Xylem's a very well known corporate player in this space, and it strikes me that this will be money well spent. The real money obviously will be the post recommendations, but I think working with blue chip consultant like this strikes me is the right way to the right way to go. And you know, I think we had a thorough conversation about this 3 or 4 council meetings ago about what's within the capabilities of the staff to do as far as evaluating where the water loss is coming, and what benefits of bringing in a real expert and a third-party expert. So, you know, I think I support the recommendation from staff to move this item along and proceed, and we'll see where we are in the fall when the recommendations come back.
Okay, Deputy Mayor?
My curiosity was around why. I was asking myself why isn't this going to RFP? I thought that's a process that we, with particular amounts of funding or particular costs, we go to RFP. So I was wondering why this doesn't go through that process.
Good question. CAO?
Yeah, we have the opportunity to go to RFP. In this case, we received an unsolicited proposal from people who have been following our public conversation. They've worked with the town in the past, and they had intended to work with the town on a contract that we didn't end up going forward with, not for reasons anything to do with them. So we received this proposal. In that situation, turning around and going to the market for it is something that we have the opportunity to do. But we also have the opportunity to consider unsolicited proposals. So, you know, sometimes you get a proposal from a company and turning around and getting their competitor to undercut them when they've made the proposal, you know, is going to save us some money, but isn't a relationship that we want to build with a external contractor. But that's our prerogative. We do have the option to go to RFP. So the recommendation here was to accept the proposal that we'd received, but we'd also be happy to get a recommendation or a motion from council directing staff to carry out a request for proposal process, and I'm sure Xylem would bid on that process.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor, did you have a comment?
Yeah, so I think my question is around process much more than just this piece. So do we have anything in terms of policy that says we need to go to RFP when we have certain projects that are over a particular size or not? And if we don't, is that the practice we need to? So I might assume in this particular case, maybe because I don't know too much about this side of, I guess, the business, but will that same kind of decision making, for instance, if I remember our conversations around was it auditors and then getting a new auditor in place, we went to RFP. And so in terms of process, what's the process for us? And is this going against process, or it's just part of how we've done business in the past?
I believe there is a dollar value specified, is there not, CAO, beyond which we're required to do an RFP unless somebody has a proprietary right to the service being offered?
Yeah, the question here is that I think we're conflating the town going out to procure a good or service with a company offering us a proposal for something that we didn't solicit. So yeah, when we go out to procure a good or service, we do have under our procurement policy thresholds around whether we do it by quotation or whether we publish an RFP. Traditionally in the past, we have not always gone through that procedure. When we have received an unsolicited proposal, we have considered the merits of that proposal. Like I said, when council receives an unsolicited proposal and turns around and goes to the market for it, you can say that you're just trying to stick to the best practice, which is absolutely true. But it is difficult to obviously maintain the relationship with those companies that will not offer us such unsolicited proposals in the future. But that's council's prerogative. If we were going out to tender to procure a service, we would have to publish it. So if that's the practice here, we want to turn around and say, thank you, that's a great idea. We now are going out to the market to procure it, and they'd be happy to bid on that process, I'm sure. So we could also do that.
Councillor Carver?
Yes, my question was about if we did go to public tender at this point. There's already public information about the prices that they've quoted. How does that factor into an RFP situation? I mean, personally, I'm quite happy to go to follow the recommendation of staff on this. Although I do take the point about, do we have a policy? And if we do, why aren't we following it?
Mhm.
But just intuitively, I feel that this makes sense to do this, and sooner rather than later. But what are the implications of the dollar figures already being in the public purview?
Councillor Feeney.
So we do have procurement policy. I think we have followed it. I think this item does not require an RFP. I think fundamentally all of those policies are backstopped by the theme of materiality, of which this item doesn't reach. We have many engagements and many items that we seek at far higher sticker prices than this particular investment. So, I think there is a nuance between a well-received proposal received, unsolicited proposal received, versus our intent to go to the market with a budgeted item. So I think the deputy mayor makes a good point. I mean, there's a number of things that around large ticket investment that requires RFPs. For example, the pumper truck. I'm assuming we'll have an RFP, and many other things on our agenda. I mean, but we don't go to RFP for a number of things that are in our capital program, like the $40,000 wood chipper or the skid steer. I mean, the staff does their best, but we don't. Hence the benefit of a procurement person, mayor, and that's something I know you and the other mayors are talking about at the Joint Services Board. So, and I'm in full support of that procurement officer being put in place so that we get some shared economies of scale with the other municipalities. But I don't think an item like this rises to that level of materiality. And coupled with the fact that with such a blue chip provider, I mean, this is the absolute best in class blue chip provider of these services with industry leading expertise. It would be, so I feel very comfortable that whatever product we receive from a company of that stature, a large publicly traded corporation, that we're going to get a good product for this amount of money.
Okay. I guess I would ask where's the issue of transparency here? Are we going to pick and choose which offers we're going to accept? Or are we going to use our procurement policy as it is supposed to be used and the intention for which it is supposed to be used? That being one of fairness and one of transparency. The staff will define what they're looking for. Staff will define the criteria by which they would select the responses to the RFP, and ideally, the quality from this particular company would be high enough on the scale that it would offset any variations in price. But I would still have concerns to accept the bid because they chose to make it for us. That flies in the face of the procurement policy, which we have. Councillor Feeney.
Mayor, this is a budgeted item. This is in our existing budget.
Yep.
This was part of our program for the year. And it's well under the budgeted item, the funding amount that we have for the item. The issue is that this company does this. They scour looking for business opportunities. They became aware that we had this item budgeted and decided, hey, maybe this is a service we could provide them. Why don't we give them a proposal? So it would be the same thing as if we received a phone call tomorrow with somebody wanting to sell us a pumper truck, albeit on a much smaller dollar sign. And we would say, hey, that sounds like a great deal. Maybe we should take it, or we would decide to proceed with the RFP. The challenge is in this particular case, we've already disclosed to the market what the offer was for. So at this point, I tend to take the recommendation of staff and move the item along. And that would be a motion I'd be prepared to make.
Okay. Deputy Mayor, and I'll come back to you, Councillor Feeney.
Yeah, so I'm not in disagreement with the staff proposal. I think for me, it's we seem to apply policy in some cases and not others, and then that for me is a little bit problematic. So if I was listening to council maybe a few years ago or maybe last year and had council wants to renovate the town hall and came with a proposal to town council, I don't think you'd have accepted it, even if that dollar amount was low. You probably would have gone to RFP. And so in terms of process, I think that consistency is important. If we have certain cutoff points, let's stick to those, and not be swayed because a proposal has come in. So in this particular case, maybe it's a very good decision, but what precedent are we setting in that particular case? So I would be, from that side of things, I'm a little bit wary about the decision-making process. That's just what I wanted to point out.
Thank you. Councillor Carver and then CAO.
I may be wrong, but I believe that Councillor Feeney made a motion, but perhaps it wasn't really a motion. He did use the word motion, and I was going to second it if he really had made a motion.
I had suggested to Councillor Feeney that after the Deputy Mayor spoke, we'd come back to him and Deb would give him a couple of minutes to get all the words together for his motion. Just let's go to the CAO first.
Yeah, I guess, I wanted to dig into the Deputy Mayor's point about adherence to policies, because I think this is an important point about the intent of policies. So our procurement policy is intended to ensure a balance between fairness to competitors and the best result for the town, for the community in terms of value. We have to make a balance there, so that the actual last clause of the policy says, it will be our intention to follow this policy. However, not following this policy will not invalidate any decisions made by council. I think what the policy is intended to do is say, we, in applying it, are supposed to use our best judgment. This particular case, as Councillor Feeney's mentioned, is a multinational company in competition only with other multinational companies. So we're not talking about a case where we're picking a local contractor due to connections that they might have with the council or the town or members of staff. We're talking about an unsolicited proposal from a multinational company. If we go to the market, it will only be to provide an opportunity for a couple of other multinational consultancies who I'm sure, while they would bid or might bid, would also not raise an objection to our acceptance of a bid. And so the intent, I guess, is my point. I don't think the intent, and I think if we say what precedent are we setting, well, if the intent is to follow the letter of the policy under all circumstances to the detriment of potentially the outcome, I think the precedent there is also damaging. I think we need to be conscious why we have a procurement policy. It isn't just to point to the fine print and say, sorry, we can't do things. It is to be able to balance. So I think council has some things to consider here, in terms of the recommended course of action. We don't feel that this puts anyone at a disadvantage in terms of an opportunity to compete for this work. I think if council feels that is being skewed within the intent of the policy, then I think council does need to step in and say, hey, let's put this out to the market. Otherwise, I think we stand by that recommendation. So I hope that helps a little bit in terms of what the intent of the policy is. I think the intent is to be able to apply judgment within the policy. So, but either course of action is absolutely appropriate based on council's perception of the need to provide a competitive option here.
Councillor Feeney. You're on mute, sir.
Mayor, there was an attached motion to the council's recommendation, which I'll reiterate, in that a motion that council directs staff to engage Xylem Inc. to perform the works described in the identification and reduction of non-revenue waste proposal.
Thank you. Counselor Carver, second? Counselor Carver seconds the motion. You've heard the motion. On the question. All in favor? 2, 3. Opposed? Deputy Mayor, you did not choose a course. That'll count as a no.
Which is my right.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
So the
Yeah.
motion is carried 4-3. Okay. We'll go. Let's go to the next item. Vehicle electrification. CAO?
Yeah, happy to just briefly introduce this one. This is a long-standing project for which we received approval from NRCan along with other municipal electric utilities in Atlantic Canada, 11 of us under St. John Energy, to install chargers around our communities. This is an update on the charger installations with a proposal in that regard. When we looked at the charger locations initially, we did not look at any sites that belong to private companies. In Berwick and Antigonish, a number of the sites that they've selected based on convenience and the usership of parking lots, central locations, have been with private companies. We have an opportunity to make a pitch to the independent store BMO, because that's the most central location that we're missing. And so there's a recommendation here that we, the council direct staff to approach one or both of those. Traditionally, we've had agreements with BMO around the parking area, but it is more limited than the parking for the independent store. So we've suggested maybe we could approach both of them. Alternatively, I think the report does provide some additional options. Of course, there are other options if council's not inclined to a private location, but because that has been a common solution in the other communities, we wanted to raise that. And then there's a second recommendation here, one of these grow the load initiatives we always talk about, where we have an opportunity, and I think we've talked about this a number of times in the past, to get into the utility controlled EV charger scenario, where essentially as we get more and more EVs charging at homes, we want to be able to control the timing of that load to complement our renewable generation. And so there's a proposed very small scale project there to provide and control and track the use of chargers in our territory. So 2 recommendations as basically Catherine continues to roll out our GHE plan. It's all already included in the budget, but just wanted council's direction with regards to the specifics.
Okay, Councillor Burdick.
Thank you. These both seem like good ideas, and for it to be downtown for the visibility is also good, as well as the utility of it. So I'd like to make the first motion that council direct staff to reach out to the independent store and or BMO to discuss a license agreement for an EV charger on their property.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a seconder on that motion? Councillor Now seconds it. Question? I'm curious, do we have a license agreement with the Mahone Bay Center?
It hasn't been concluded, but we have a draft that they have looked at and has been modified to what the staff consider acceptable. And my understanding is the board consider acceptable.
And-
we had some insurance considerations just to make sure everybody was comfortable.
And will that run a parallel to either BMO or the grocery store, or both, or?
So yeah, our drafting of that agreement has now served as a template for some of the other locations in Berwick and
Good.
Antigonish as well. One of the things that often happens in Mahone Bay to our benefit is we have a lot of folks with local expertise. So the center asked a lot of good questions, and those questions I think have helped to
Good.
cover off things in the other agreements.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? On the motion? All in favor? Motion is carried. Let's go to motion number 2. Councillor Wilson. You're on mute, Counselor Wilson.
I was pushing the button furiously. I'm sorry, it didn't seem to work. If I read this correctly, what this report is recommending is that we pay $950 for charges for private homeowners to install, and they pay the installation costs. Is that the gist of what motion number 2 is?
Yeah, that we would provide the chargers that would be controlled by the utility in terms of how they charge, and that the homeowners would pay the installation costs.
But we would control, but we wouldn't own.
That is a good question. I don't know. This is a model that's kind of been pioneered with Berwick with respect to things like hot water heaters. I don't believe that we have retained ownership, but that is a good question.
Not to make too fine a point of it, Your Worship, but I would be inclined to say yes to a situation like this if it was a lease program, like many utilities do with hot water systems. But I am very reluctant to vote yes to a gift of nearly $1,000 to probably already relatively privileged folks who could afford an electric car.
Thank you. CAO.
Just for clarification, if it was a leased system, would there be an intention to recover costs on that, Councillor Wilson, or is that just in terms of ownership? Okay.
That is way outside my job description.
Well, I can imagine if in the case of the home heaters, it's often been retained ownership and leasing it to the property owner, that probably is the intention here. And I'm not the one who authored that, so I'd have to go back to Catherine. But quite likely, if that has been the case with the hot water program, that's what this is based on. So I would think that would be the option here. But we'd still be looking at covering the cost associated with the unit, even if we retain ownership.
Yeah.
Counselor Carver.
I share Councillor Wilson's concerns about putting that kind of money into a private property. Although I like the idea of incentive, I'm not sure I really like this particular version. And am I right in thinking that the proposal was for 10, up to 10?
Was
I think it
up
was.
to 5 was the proposal.
Oh, 5, sorry. Okay, I knew it was somewhere. 5. And then a related question is, are the other municipalities in our triumvirate of greenhouse gas action participating in this, Berwick and Antigonish in it?
So the note there was that our proposal was that we launch a real limited pilot program, and then the results would be followed by the other area units. But I think in terms of wanting to suggest that we launch something like this summer, we would be the first ones probably doing that. Now, in the time it takes to figure out the details, I wouldn't be surprised if the others go ahead with it. Usually we just, between the three of us, we each push certain envelopes, and then we all benefit from the results.
Okay. Counselor Feeney.
So, I think under the theme of our grow the load initiatives, I mean, this is one of the myriad of ideas, the idea to stimulate consumption of power to the benefit of the utility. So, based on the math, like on the back of a napkin, if for $1,000 subsidy, we would be in pretty good shape if we sold, $10,000 worth of power incremental. We would make $4,000 of margin on that, which would far exceed the $1,000 subsidy. So, I think there's probably a very solid idea behind this one sentence, and like anything in this space, it takes storytelling and business cases and to illustrate why the investment / subsidy is actually to the benefit of the entire community. So my gut instinct tells me that this is of the many good ideas in the Grow Your Load initiatives, this is probably also a winner. But I share council's reticence about being able to sign up to it in the absence of not having the collateral material so that we could explain it to people, you know, what are we getting for the $1,000 subsidy? Personally, I think there's an answer to that question. I just think we're probably just a little early being able to answer it. So that item, maybe we are better off deferring it, and then having a follow-up discussion.
Thank you. CAO.
Yeah, so what I would suggest is maybe rather than deferring, just make a motion to direct staff to provide some supplemental information on the recommendation. And then we have another meeting coming up this month. I'm sure Catherine and Lenta can get that together, and it would be great to see some of the numbers behind it as well, I'm sure. So I don't think that would be any problem if that's something that you'd like to do.
Okay, Councillor Carver.
I like that idea, and I would make that motion. And I have a question also, or to include in the background information. First of all, let me make the motion and get a seconder.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Somebody, do you want to second that? Councillor Wilson is going to second it.
Then my
Councillor
question is, what evidence do we have that this kind of subsidy is going to change the behavior of people in terms of purchasing electric vehicles? So that could come back as information in the report if you can find it, if there is any.
Good question, Councillor Wilson.
Well, not to put too fine a point on it, but nobody's going to want to put an electric charger in the garage unless they already have an electric car.
Yeah, fair enough.
Okay. Deputy Mayor, you're looking. Nothing? Okay. Any other comments? Okay, we have a motion and a seconder, and the motion is to send this item back to staff for some additional information and the supporting data around the home charger pilot program. You've heard the motion on the question. All in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you. Okay, let's go to staff report on funding applications.
Councillor
CAO?
Wilson had his hand up.
I'm sorry, Deputy Mayor.
Councillor Wilson had his hand up. He was trying to get your attention.
Okay,
Sorry, Your Worship. I was just wondering, while we're on the subject of electricity, I'm a little confused by process as well here. Last week, there was an announcement that we have got the funding and we're going ahead with the solar garden. And I understand that the announcement included an announcement of the site up by the water plant. But maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think that this council has approved either the project or the location.
CAO.
I certainly would expect that there will be something coming back in terms of the backup information around the location. But as far as the approval of the town's contribution to the project, you know, my understanding is that, and you know, this has always been one of those things where it's council could put the brakes on it. When we applied to the federal government for the funding, we made our intention known. So I think AREA has always said, you know, do we have the option to return or refuse the funding? And we do have that option. So the final recommendation, you know, from AREA that we actually begin work on the project. Like I said, I'm expecting we will have a lot more information for council very soon. We didn't get to know when this announcement was coming. It came out of, you know, as they always do. We were told for almost a year that it was coming soon, and then it happened very suddenly. But I do take the point that, you know, we have publicly said we're getting funding for a project, and there's always a sort of brinksmanship when it comes to the federal government with that, because once they've announced their contribution, it is very difficult to turn it down. But we do have that option. We haven't incurred costs on the project at this time.
Okay.
So expect a report. I know Sean's working on it.
So any thoughts around a date CAO, we've got one more meeting in
Yeah, we'd love to
July.
get it in, get something into that next meeting. Definitely there'll be an in-camera session with regards to the project on the next meeting. I hope that we will also have some public-facing information. That is harder to do, just because of the nature of what we can disclose publicly versus what we can't. But we'll definitely have a closed session with some presentation of information and discussion at the next session, the 29th.
Okay, thank you. And the 29th, just if I could go one piece further, notwithstanding the recent change in the schedule for the discussion around the committee work on land use bylaw and the planning strategy, that their council has no meetings scheduled for the month of August. Okay. Okay. All right, let's go with where we are talking about the funding piece. This is the final one on our list. The Enabling Accessibility Fund is in there. Communicating Community Revitalization Fund. CAO, did you want to speak to this item?
Yes, certainly do want to. This is another one of these federal actions that happens quite suddenly and dramatically. So we have a couple of funding programs coming up this month. They're both federal funding programs. The Enabling Accessibility Program has been around for some time. It has a number of different streams. It was, I think it was, an opportunity to advise council that there was a stream, that was the mid-sized project stream that is available to us right now, but we don't have a project that we recommend applying to that because of the minimum threshold, and that the nature of that minimum work is that it be a minimum of 350,000 for accessibility improvements, not just a project at a minimum level of 350,000. The recommendation concerns the other funding program, which is the ACOA program, and that is just totally new and has a very short turnaround, about almost exactly 1 month from initial announcement to deadline, I think. There's a number of criteria provided, and so what we did was we looked back at our existing budget, council's approved budget for 21-22. We have a number of projects that suit those criteria individually or potentially together. Given the limited amount of time available, I presented the projects there with the recommendation that we apply, but what we would be willing to put into that basket to apply for is something I'm absolutely looking for council input on. The criteria kind of, are stronger together, is my understanding. So a project that attempts to address all 4 of these criteria is stronger, considered a stronger application than one that focuses on a single 1 or 2 of these criteria. So for me, I'd love to get council's input on whether we would include some or all of these components, whether council is generally supportive to make an application to this program. And then there is a second part, which has to do with supporting community organization applications to this program as well. There's one that's referenced there, and then another one actually came in today from the tennis club asking if they were to make an application for improvements to the tennis facility, would the council be willing to provide a letter of support to those improvements? So first, I guess to focus on the town's part, if anyone has questions or comments, I do recommend that we apply to the program. I think it's the kind of program that ACOA puts out every now and then that we would be quite likely to receive funding under. The larger the project, the more we probably want to contribute in order to leverage that, make it worth their while to contribute. And if it's something a little bit smaller, we're probably more likely to get it approved at a lower price point. So it's really just council's discretion because we have so many suitable projects.
Okay. I notice CAO under the CCRF, it talks about cost sharing would range from 50 to 75%. Can I assume from that the town would be required to put in 25 to 50%?
Yes, that's how that's meant. And the amount that we would put in is essentially, it's been put to us that if we want a larger sum, if we're looking for a larger project, we should try to put in 50%.
Okay.
But it's not obligatory to provide 50%. So I would say if it's above 100,000 or below 100,000, but even if it's 20,000 and we want to put in 10,000, I'm sure that will be looked at more favorably. We had budgeted to do these projects, most of them, out of our own coffers. The big exception to that being the walking bridge, which we'd only committed to doing at a 93% funding. You know, we're not at that level right now.
That was going to be my next question, CAO, was, does that then mean that anything we're going to provide co-funding for is already in our budget?
Yes, except for, as I say, the walking bridge project, which if we come in at 50% at this, that would be a significant difference from the projected 93%.
7% that we would have needed otherwise.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I mean, it's far less than our projected contribution to the Shoreline project, but it doesn't actually achieve any of the objectives of the Shoreline project. It was just kind of an add-on that I know over the years has gotten quite a bit of attention. We get a bunch of letters about it the year before last, I think, as people haven't forgotten it was proposed.
Okay. Any other comments? Deputy Mayor and then Councillor Carver.
Basically have two I guess one comment and a question. The first comment was around the walking bridge. My perception, I wasn't on council when the conversation was being had. My perception was that there were concerns about the walking bridge in terms of how it affects traffic flow and folks who have businesses on this other side of town. If traffic is diverted that way, that might be it might be problematic. I remember having those conversations when we had Tammy to Mummy and how it was difficult to get people come this way when that end of town was very busy. So I'm a little bit concerned about that. And then the other question, I guess, was around we had talked about access to the pond area and the possibility of addressing the Quinlan concern and their parking area. Will that be something that the CEO would see would fit in this kind of, I guess, application?
CAO.
So
and then Councillor Carver will come back.
The first part, I don't know, Deputy Mayor, if that's a question for me as far as the concerns around where traffic will go. I guess the one thing I want to emphasize is that this bridge would link the Comfort Station with Main Street and with the bandstand area, which, as far as the criteria of this program, the accessibility of the Comfort Stations has been a key feature for COVID resilience. It's been very appreciated by the business community, and the winterization of those as a part of describing the project could be a good way to connect things. But I won't comment as far as the concerns that have been raised. As far as the part two to your question, sorry, this is my COVID vaccine. Remind me, part two to your question, Deputy Mayor. I usually can.
Yeah, just asking about the conversations that had been had with the Quinlan and their concern around the parking area and traffic going through there.
So Aquatic Gardens Access as a project that is in our budget is included in this list of potential components. It would certainly be a suitable component. And I think if we go with a couple of project components, including the crossings and things, it builds a picture of increasing accessibility for pedestrians within the downtown, which is a big part of the criteria for this program. So it would be a good component in terms of the program criteria. As far as agreement with the Quinlan, that continues to be a discussion. And I've phrased this Aquatic Gardens Access because at the end of the day, we don't have I didn't put Quinlan in the name here. But if we do get funding, then that will be a further driver to work with property owners, including the Quinlan, to make that a reality. But I just want to stress that although they did approach the town with a willingness to discuss it, it's not like we have a defined agreement or anything in that regard.
Thank you. Councillor Carver and then Councillor Feeney.
Thank you. I am certainly appreciating the package that you've built in terms of the Main Street downtown package. But what something that's in my mind is, and maybe this is a red herring, is about straight pipes. I mean, is this the kind of funding that a straight pipe project could be, packaged in as well somehow?
Green projects is listed there. It's a big subject, and this was a quick rollout of a program, so I can't say that it would be ineligible. I think it might be harder to draw the connection to these sort of downtown economic activity, COVID resilience themes. But that being said, happy to talk to ACOA. I know there'll be a few more conversations with ACOA. I've had one, where we were certainly encouraged to apply. But given the fast moving nature of this, I'm sure there will be some questions that they'll even have to check back on in terms of eligibility.
Thank you. Councillor Feeney.
Just a couple things, Mayor. So, I think we've been successful in this space before, but inevitably this program will be very well subscribed. And I think the CAO there'll be many, many millions of dollars more requests than there'll be available funding. So, on a good day, we would get some prorated portion of the overall package. That would be my guess. So it behooves us to put in the full meal deal package. I think point one. And then we would have to have a follow-up process to figure out based on the funding that we hopefully received at some reasonable time in the future versus finding out it's 2025 before we get an answer. There would have to be a process where we kind of can figure out of this list, what are the most important priorities. So a year ago, we had a similar discussion, and we made a decision to defer the lamppost, for example, and proceed with the bandstand. And I think as long as we have a similar process where we can get together and say, yes, we're going to do the bridge, or no, we're going to do the transportation programs, and we're all on the same page, that will be a good day. And finally, I think part of the commentary from staff is around other community organizations, specifically the Mahone Bay Center, and the kind of revisiting the soccer pitch upgrade. And then I understand from tonight, there was some commentary about the tennis court putting in a proposal as well. And I'm assuming that the council would be required to step up and support those initiatives for them to be well received. And so I think in this case, who knows what Mahone Bay would get as a package, but if everybody goes to the same trough at the same time, hopefully there'll be something for everybody. So are we, I know there was a discussion in the commentary about support. When we had this issue come to council 6 or 7 months ago, we received a little package from the Mahone Bay Center and the Mahone Bay Soccer Club. Is that, I doubt we'll have the time, Dylan, based on the quick turnaround. Like, are we required to receive something before we support their document, their bid?
CAO?
I can confirm that the proposal is the same as the proposal that they previously made.
Okay.
So they're just looking to take it in because it wasn't successful at that time and bring it forward to this program. As far as the tennis club, their request just came in today because this program is brand new and people are scrambling to see if it's something that they could take advantage of. And I think that they are still working to work out some of the details. Their key focus is on improving accessibility within the club. So that, the challenge is we don't have another regular council meeting prior to this deadline. So if council does feel that you have enough information with regard to the Mahone Bay United proposal, because we did receive a detailed proposal, I don't have a similar amount of details from the tennis club at this time, but they did request that we consider it. And I knew we had this on the agenda tonight when it came in this afternoon.
Councillor Carver.
Yes, a question for Mr. Hyde. Is there any sense that by supporting the requests from the community groups, that the town jeopardizes its own pitch, its own,
I think that's the question sort of that Councillor Feeney phrased quite diplomatically is, ACOA will certainly get more requests than they're in a position to satisfy. And they always say, and they were quite quick to say to me, no, it won't jeopardize our application. We should be willing to support anything in our community, and the more the merrier. But they have a finite amount of money. So if they look at applications from Mahone Bay, they're bound to consider the full range of them. And most likely what it might result in, as Councillor Feeney said, is, maybe they don't give the town as much as we apply for, which is a common response, and we have to consider how that would affect our project, and we could just adjust components as we usually do. So they always say no, it won't, but there's a finite amount of money, so there has to be at some point some give.
Councillor Wilson.
Your worship, I would like to move that council direct staff to apply to the Canadian Community Revitalization Fund, CCRF, to do projects related to the list as presented to us in approximately a total value of about $465,000, and that we direct staff to provide a letter of support for the Mahone Bay United's application as well.
Councillor Burdick.
I'm just seconding Councillor Wilson's motions.
Okay. CAO.
Glad to have the motion. I just wanted to make a small point of clarification for Kelly's math. I did put the total for the transportation project at 120,000, but I'm proposing only the things that are indented under it for a total of 66,000. So the actual total is a little bit less.
Oh, I see. I
yeah.
added it now.
And that's just the way I presented it there. I just wanted to make sure that was clear.
Pardon me.
Councillor Carver.
I wonder if Councillor Wilson would consider including support for the tennis club request in the motion, even though we haven't seen their request.
Sure, why not? Provided Councillor Burdick is on side with that.
Yes.
I have a question, CAO. If in fact the town signs off its support for those projects, whether it be the tennis court or the soccer field or whatever the case may be, does that mean that Diracoa, the town is prepared to pay the 50% that you don't?
We would have to clarify in the letters of support that the town is not materially contributing to the projects, but we're providing letter of support and we're consenting to the work taking place on town property, because in most cases it would be on town property.
Of course, for the last time that we provided the Mahone Bay Football Club with the letter of support, there was no money on the table from the town. As long
Yes,
as
and I think I don't
point.
know what percentage they're intending to request. I don't know what their pitch will be, but we'll be clear that the town is not contributing to the project, but we are consenting to it and we are supporting the application.
Okay. And are you also suggesting that, not unlike the tennis club, at the meeting at the end of July, we will have additional information that will provide us with that financial insight to
The
the
challenge
project?
here, we don't, the application deadline here is the 23rd, so we don't even have time to
for that.
look at it further. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So anyone else? We have a motion on the floor, moved and seconded. Direct staff to apply the Canada Community Revitalization Fund, and also that council direct staff provide a letter of support to the Mahone Bay United CCRF application and also the Mahone Bay Tennis Club application. Okay, on the question. All in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Let's go to Councillor Carver and draft municipal planning strategy.
Thank you. A week or so ago, I sent an email to council and the Upland, the consultant, asking whether the culture and heritage section of the draft planning documents could be sent to the Heritage Advisory Committee for a focused discussion, review, and possible recommendations to council or to the decision-making process around the planning documents. It struck me when I went through that section that the Heritage Advisory Committee would have some particular expertise and interest in order to inform that discussion and hope that there would be an opportunity for that to happen. And my understanding, if I've got this correct, Mr. Hyde, that it would require direction from council to for that to happen. Otherwise, it would be part of the public consultation process.
CAO.
Yeah, so the issue here is around the process that council's established for review of the draft document. So we, at the outset of the process, the council determined that the PAC and council would serve as the steering team for the project and would look at the documents prepared by the consultants prior to their being released publicly. The reasoning behind that is to ensure that the next phase of engagement focuses where the PAC and council see the opportunities and a willingness in the community to consider those opportunities. So at this stage, some of the draft documents that have been developed that are not public, and they've been the work of the consultants and not having been reviewed by the steering team and council, being released to the public, even if the public is, a committee of council that meets in public, it sort of circumvents that existing process and, potentially creates questions in the community around that section being split off and why it's disclosed the way that it is and what if it changes when it gets released later. So the intention was that once the steering team and council have reached the point where they're comfortable with Upland proceeding with the public engagement, which is intended to run from Labor Day till sometime in November, but obviously won't begin until council and the steering team have said it's okay to begin. At that time, the committees could have sessions in the fall months to consider the document. That will still be a draft document, but it will be a draft document that the steering team has recommended to council and council has approved. And there still will be an opportunity to provide feedback and to make amendments to it. So I think the process as intended is just a preliminary at this point or it's a premature at this point to release it. But obviously, if we felt that it was time sensitive or was significant enough, I had said, it's not really our place at the staff level to disclose it, but if council wanted to amend the established process, or if everyone in understanding of this process is comfortable to put it on the HAC agenda in September or October, then, such as it exists at that time, obviously, when we have disclosed that section of the document.
Councillor Carver.
And would that require a motion, Mr. Hyde, to ensure that it get to the HAC agenda as early as possible in September when it has gone public?
Council can certainly, always with advisory committees delegate or designate an item direct an item to the agenda of the committee. So for council to say, move that council refer to the Heritage Advisory Committee relevant sections of the draft municipal planning strategy and land use bylaw at such a time as they are released for public consultation. And then we'll just pick it up. I'm sure Kelly's listening to all this. We'll pick it up and we'll make that a part of an HAC agenda in the fall. So that would be in order.
So I'm going to ask if the clerk was listening to the wording that you just proposed, because I would like to make that motion.
Not closely enough, but I know where to get the wording from.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So if somebody would second that would be nice.
Councillor Burdick will second. Okay.
And Mayor,
Councillor Feeney.
Mayor, just briefly, I think this is a good idea based on the clarifications from the CAO and those timelines. I think it's reasonable. In reading the preamble, there are items that I think will be edited with the benefit of some of the subject matter expertise that sits on the HAC. So I do think the document will improve with this review. And I think Councilor Carver is a little closer to some of the fine details, but there are a number of items that kind of in layman's terms we would say are inaccuracies, not on the policies, but really on some of the preamble. And I think fortunately the HSC has some members with some real subject matter expertise that can help kind of improve those small items. So I think it'll be a good thing.
Okay. We have a motion on the floor, but basically the trigger point becomes when they're released to the public.
Right.
Okay. You've heard the motion? All in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you. Let's go to the next item, which is the special meeting of the Oakland Watershed Advisory Committee on June 28th. Counselor Now, do you want to tell us the good news about the motion that came out of that meeting?
Yes, we discussed the risks involved around the Oakland Lake, and we're looking at putting in some other things into the risk thing, and most of it is to dealing with climate change. But in the meantime, we'd like council to write a letter to Transportation Infrastructure Renewal, asking that that area within the watershed be sanded and not salted throughout the winter season. So I would like to make that motion.
Okay, do we have a seconder? Councillor Carver seconds. Okay, on the question. All in favor? The motion's carried. Thank you. Let's go to the Policy and Strategy Committee meeting minutes. This is another meeting on June 28th. We have a couple of motions in there, 3 of them actually. Council, what would you like to do? First motion is around the draft local improvement bylaw.
And the first motion as presented, there's the tricky wording. So for the council, that would just be to give first reading.
First
to-
reading,
Yeah.
yes, okay. So do we need another motion? Because council's already done this.
Give first reading to the draft local improvement bylaw?
Yeah,
I don't think we have. Because it's the version of it that was only reviewed at the strategy. and
yeah,
policy.
okay.
I know it's the
Deputy
whole
Mayor.
council, but we didn't actually do it.
Deputy Mayor, do you want to make the motion?
Yes, I'd like to move that council do the first reading for the draft local improvement bylaw as amended.
Thank you, thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Burdick? You've heard the motion? All in favor? Motion's carried. Deputy CAO, will we now be scheduling a public hearing for that piece?
Yes, we will. It will end up being in September because of
Timeline.
advertising. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, let's go to the next item in that meeting, which a motion again from the deputy mayor around the tree policy. Councillor Carver,
I'd like to move that council direct staff to draft a tree management policy for the management of trees on town property for the consideration of council.
thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Burdick? On the question? Councillor Wilson, did you have a question? You're on mute, sir.
I
There.
know, I'm getting slower and slower. I just wanted to make the point, Your Worship, that specifically kept out of this motion was the language around a bylaw. And I noticed that in other places in our literature in this meeting, and for example, in the operations report, there's continuing discussion about people going ahead and working on a draft bylaw. And I would hope that the discussion we had at the policy meeting, whatever, a few days ago, was enough to have put an end to this, and that we can officially put an end to it now.
Okay. Councillor Feeney and then CAO.
So Mayor, I think language matters in this case, and I agree wholeheartedly with Councilor Wilson that I think we made a lot of progress in that meeting, and we feel very comfortable with the town establishing policies, tree management policies versus a tree management bylaw, and as it relates to town-owned town property. And so every good ideas of that day eventually comes, and maybe maybe in the future we'll be back at the table talking about a bylaw as it relates to the entire community, including private property, but that isn't on the table tonight, as I understand it. So this is, so I think Councillor Carver's point that the language throughout the document, I think it is important to talk that we are talking about a policy versus a bylaw.
Okay, thank you. CAO and then Councillor Burdick.
Initially, I wanted to raise that it might be a follow-on to this to say that the draft policy would be presented to Policy and Strategy Committee. I don't know if council wants that presented back to council or to Policy and Strategy Committee, but that might just be something to consider. And then now that there's been the further discussion about the bylaw, I wanted to clarify the previous motion around the bylaw that we continue to report on in the report, as Councillor Wilson noted, which had indicated that the bylaw consideration would be attached to the planning, the plan review process. That still is the case. So in the draft municipal planning strategy, there would either be or there would not be a reference to the further development of a tree bylaw. So that is something that the steering team will still have to discuss. And presuming that council is clear on how that relates to this discussion at Policy and Strategy Committee, it will come off at that point. But I wanted to stress that the previous motion was to link it to the process for the municipal planning strategy, which it has been, and therefore the planners have made reference to it. And now is the steering team's review of that document. So either it will come back to council as a recommend we do or recommend we don't, and then council would have to actually put an end to that discussion at that time, if in fact that is the intention of council. So I just wanted to note that you will still see it in the report in that regard. I guess council could have the prerogative to pass a motion tonight to direct the Upland to amend the draft documents to remove that, but I don't know that that is I think it's appropriate for that process to continue, and then within a short period of time, it will be updated on the report to say that we either did or didn't include that in the draft planning strategy. So I just wanted to make that comment.
Okay, Councillor Burdick.
Thank you. Yes, I appreciate the clarification from the CAO about that, because I don't think we had actually, we had discussed it, but I do see the bylaw as something that is being considered by staff, or that there was a report in production about it. And I feel like it deserves a longer or shorter conversation when that time comes, and not tonight. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Carver.
I just want to go back to Mr. Hyde's comments about, or question about whether this should come back, a draft policy should come back to council or go to the Policy and Strategy Committee.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not quite sure, but I realized that I did insert for council's consideration at the end of the motion, which was not the wording that had been proposed by staff. I think I kind of like things coming back to council, but if council prefers it to go through the Policy and Strategy Committee, the problem is that could be so far down the road.
And if we presented to council, of course, the motion that would be in order at that time to refer to Policy and Strategy Committee. So it's more about the fact that it appears on a council agenda, is therefore, public and has that context.
Yeah.
But if council could still just refer it to the next meeting of the Policy and Strategy Committee.
So given that perspective, I will leave the motion as it is for council's consideration.
Okay. Okay, anything else on the motion? On the policy?
Mayor,
Councillor Feeney.
Mayor, would you mind just asking to have the motion just reissued, or if Mo, could you fill me in here? I have complete trust in Councillor Carver's wordsmithing. I'm just curious what we're voting on.
The motion is that council direct staff draft a tree management policy for the management of trees on town property for council's consideration.
Okay. Councillor Burdick, that is what you seconded? Okay. You heard the motion on the question. All in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you. Let's go to the final And that was around the agenda for the July 26th meeting of the Policy and Strategy Committee to include a discussion of the town logo and the dangerous and unsightly policy. Deputy Mayor, would you like to make that motion?
Sure. I'd like to move that council set the agenda for the July 26th, 2021 meeting of the Policy and Strategy Committee to include a discussion of the town logo and the dangerous and unsightly policy.
Thank you. And do we have a seconder? Councillor Feeney? You've heard the motion. On the question. All in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you. Let's go to the next item on the agenda, which is the draft local improvement bylaw, which we looked at.
Nothing further is required on that one.
No, I think we're done with that. Okay. Boop. Then let's go to the Lunenburg County Senior Safety Programs Monthly Report. You have the report in front of you. Are there any questions? Councillor Carver.
Yes, I have two comments. One is in the list of the nature of referrals, just pointing out the very high number of precarious housing concerns. A lot of situations are happening where houses are being sold out from underneath senior people, including seniors. Seniors are being persuaded that house prices are so high, this is a good time to sell, and then are absolutely unable to find any place to live. I mean, that's just a couple of situations. So it's a very, very serious situation. And the work continues. And I just, as a point of information, would just like to say that I am no longer the chair of the Lunenburg County Senior Safety Partnership Society. We've held our first AGM, and I voted myself off the island. Well, not off the island. I'm still on the island, but no longer chair. In my term appointment is still 2 years from when we started, till the end of 2022, and I will remain active as past chair. So, and the new chair is David Murdoch, who was one of our citizen members on the board, and he's taking hold.
Good
Yep.
show.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure they are quite appreciative of your dedicated time with the group, Councillor Carver, and we look forward to your coming endeavors with them as the past chair.
Yeah, it's been a good 4 years being chair, and we've accomplished a lot. So I'm feeling very pleased and very ready to pass the baton.
Good. Thank you. Well, guess what? Now that's about it. There's no new business. We don't have a closed session. I wonder, Kelly, are there some folks with us at home?
I can take this one, Kelly. There are 4 people watching now, but we have no questions.
Okay, thank you. We'll just wait just a couple of seconds in case somebody wants to get their question formulated. This is the second meeting in a row, I think, isn't it, that we finished before 9 o'clock?
Don't call too much
Close to it.
attention to it. It might have been a fluke.
Yeah, I don't want to jinx it for the next one. Okay, hearing nothing. Thank you very much for your attention. Appreciate a motion to adjourn. So I'll move by the Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Now. All in favor? Good night. Thank
Good
you.
evening, folks.
Everyone.